Billie Holiday, born Eleanora Fagan April 7, 1915 to July 17, 1959, was an American jazz singer and songwriter. Nicknamed Lady Day by her friend and musical partner Lester Young, Holiday had a seminal influence on jazz and pop singing. Her vocal style, strongly inspired by jazz instrumentalists, pioneered a new way of manipulating phrasing and tempo. Critic John Bush wrote that Holiday changed the art of American pop vocals forever. She co-wrote only a few songs, but several of them have become jazz standards, notably God Bless the Child, Don't Explain, Fine and Mellow, and Lady Sings the Blues. She also became famous for singing Easy Living, Good Morning Heartache, and Strange Fruit, a protest song which became one of her standards, and was made famous with her 1939 recording. Music critic Robert Christgau called her uncoverable, possibly the greatest singer of the century. Biography. Early life and education. Billie Holiday was born as Eleanora Fagan, on April 7, 1915, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Sarah Julia Sadie Fagan. Her father, Clarence Holiday, a musician, did not marry or live with her mother. Fagan had moved to Philadelphia at the age of 19, after being rejected from her parents' home in Sandtown, Winchester, Baltimore for becoming pregnant. With no support from her parents, Holiday's mother arranged for the young Holiday to stay with her older married half-sister, Eva Miller, who lived in Baltimore. Holiday, who was of African-American ancestry, was also said to have had Irish ancestors through her mother's possible mixed heritage. Billie Holiday at 2 years old, in 1917. Billie Holiday had a difficult childhood. Her mother often took what were then known as transportation jobs, serving on passenger railroads. Holiday was left to be raised largely by Eva Miller's mother-in-law, Martha Miller, and suffered from her mother's absences, and leaving her in others' care for much of the first 10 years of her life. Holiday's autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues, first published in 1956, was sketchy about details of her early life, but much was confirmed by Stuart Nicholson in his 1995 biography of the singer. Some historians have disputed Holiday's paternity, as a copy of her birth certificate in the Baltimore archives lists the father as Frank DeVries. Other historians consider this an anomaly, probably inserted by a hospital or government worker. Frank DeVries lived in Philadelphia and Sadie Harris may have known him through her work. Sadie Harris, then known as Sadie Fagan, married Philip Goff, but the marriage was over in 2 years. Holiday was left with Martha Miller again, while her mother took more transportation jobs. Holiday frequently skipped school and her truancy resulted in her being brought before the juvenile court on January 5, 1925 when she was not yet 10. She was sent to the House of the Good Shepherd, a Catholic reform school. She was baptized there on March 19, 1925 and after 9 months in care, was paroled on October 3, 1925 to her mother, who had opened a restaurant called the East Side Grill, where she and Holiday worked long hours. By the age of 11, the girl had dropped out of school. Rape and prostitution. Holiday's mother returned to their home on December 24, 1926, to discover a neighbor, Wilbur Rich, raping her. Rich was arrested. Officials placed the girl at the House of the Good Shepherd in protective custody as a state witness in the rape case. Holiday was released in February 1927, nearly 12. She found a job running errands in a brothel. During this time, Holiday first heard the records of Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith. By the end of 1928, Holiday's mother decided to try her luck in Harlem, New York and left Holiday again with Martha Miller. By early 1929, Holiday joined her mother in Harlem. Their landlady was a sharply dressed woman named Florence Williams, who ran a brothel at 151 West 140th Street. Holiday's mother became a prostitute, and, within a matter of days of arriving in New York, Holiday, who had not yet turned 14, also became a prostitute at $5 a client. On May 2, 1929, the house was raided, and Holiday and her mother were sent to prison. After spending some time in a workhouse, her mother was released in July, followed by Holiday in October, at the age of 14. Early singing career. In Harlem she started singing in various nightclubs. Holiday took her professional pseudonym from Billie Dove, an actress she admired, and the musician Clarence Holiday, her probable father. At the outset of her career, she spelled her last name Halliday, the birth surname of her father, but eventually changed it to Holiday, his performing name. The young singer teamed up with a neighbor, tenor sax player Kenneth Harlan. From 1929 to 1931, they were a team, performing at clubs such as the Grey Dawn, Pods and Jerry's, and the Brooklyn Elks Club. Benny Goodman recalled hearing Holiday in 1931 at the Bright Spot. As her reputation grew, Holiday played at many clubs, including Mexico's and the Alhambra Bar and Grill, where Charles Linton, a vocalist who later worked with Chick Webb, first met her. It was also during this period that she connected with her father, who was playing with Fletcher Henderson's band. By the end of 1932, at the age of 17, Billie Holiday replaced the singer Manette Moore at a club called Covan's on West 132nd Street. The producer John Hammond, who loved Manette Moore's singing and had come to hear her, first heard Holiday in early 1933. Hammond arranged for Holiday to make her recording debut, at age 18, in November 1933 with Benny Goodman, singing two songs, Your Mother's Son-in-Law and Riff in the Scotch, the latter being her first hit. Son-in-Law sold 300 copies, but Riff in the Scotch, released on November 11, sold 5,000 copies. Hammond was quite impressed by Holiday's singing style. He said of her, her singing almost changed my music tastes and my musical life, because she was the first girl singer I'd come across who actually sang like an improvising jazz genius. Hammond compared Holiday favorably to Armstrong, and said she had a good sense of lyric content at her young age. In 1935, Billie Holiday had a small role as a woman being abused by her lover in Duke Ellington's short Symphony in Black, a rhapsody of Negro life. In her scene, she sang the song Saddest Tale. Recordings with Teddy Wilson, 1935 to 1938. Holiday was signed to Brunswick Records by John Hammond to record current pop tunes with Teddy Wilson in the new swing style for the growing jukebox trade. They were given free rein to improvise the material. Holiday's improvisation of the melody line to fit the emotion was revolutionary. Their first collaboration included What a Little Moonlight Can Do and Miss Brown to You. The record label did not favor the recording session because producers wanted Holiday to sound more like Claire Brown. After What a Little Moonlight Can Do garnered success, however, the company began considering Holiday an artist in her own right. She began recording under her own name a year later, on the 35-cent Vocalion label, producing a series of extraordinary performances with groups comprising the swing era's finest musicians. With their arrangements, Wilson and Holiday took pedestrian pop tunes, such as 24 Hours a Day #6 Pop, or Yankee Doodle Never Went to Town, and turned them into jazz classics. Most of Holiday's recordings with Wilson, or under her own name during the 1930s and early 1940s, are regarded as important parts of the jazz vocal library. She was then in her early to late 20s. Another frequent accompanist was the tenor saxophonist Lester Young, who had been a boarder at her mother's house in 1934, and with whom Holiday had a special rapport. He said, "Well, I think you can hear that on some of the old records, you know. Sometime I'd sit down and listen to 'em myself, and it sound like two of the same voices, if you don't be careful, you know, or the same mind, or something like that." Young nicknamed her Lady Day, and she, in turn, dubbed him Press. Hammond spoke about the commercial impact of the Teddy Wilson-Billie Holiday sides from 1935 to 1938, calling them a great asset to Brunswick. The record label, according to Hammond, was broken, unable to record many jazz tunes. Because Wilson, Holiday, Lester Young, and other musicians came into the studio without any arrangements, which cost money, and improvised the material as they went along, the records they produced were very cheap. Holiday was never given any royalties for her work, instead being paid a flat fee, which saved the record label money. Some of the records produced were largely successful, such as the single I Cried for You, which sold 15,000 copies. Hammond said of the record, 15,000 was a giant hit for Brunswick in those days. I mean a giant hit. Most records that made money sold around 3,000 to 4,000. Working for Count Basie and Artie Shaw, 1937 to 1938. In late 1937, Holiday had a brief stint as a big band vocalist with Count Basie. The traveling conditions of the band were often poor, and included one-nighters in clubs, moving from city to city with little stability. Holiday chose the songs she sang, and had a hand in the arrangements, choosing to portray her then-developing persona of a woman unlucky in love. Her tunes included I Must Have That Man, Travelin' All Alone, I Can't Get Started, and Summertime, a hit for Holiday in 1936, originating in the opera Porgy and Bess a few years earlier. Count Basie had gotten used to Holiday's heavy involvement in the band. He said, when she rehearsed with the band, it was really just a matter of getting her tunes like she wanted them, because she knew how she wanted to sound, and you couldn't tell her what to do. Holiday found herself in direct competition with popular singer Ella Fitzgerald, with whom Holiday would later become friends. Fitzgerald was the vocalist for the Chick Webb Band, who were in competition with Count Basie. On January 16, 1938, the same day that Benny Goodman performed his legendary Carnegie Hall jazz concert, the Count Basie and Chick Webb bands had a battle at the Savoy Ballroom. Chick Webb and Fitzgerald were declared winners by Metronome magazine. Downbeat magazine declared Holiday and Basie the winners. A straw poll of the audience saw Fitzgerald win by a 3-1 margin. Some of the tunes Holiday performed with Basie were recorded. I Can't Get Started, They Can't Take That Away From Me, and Swing It Brother Swing, are all commercially available. Although Holiday was unable to record in the studio with Count Basie, she did include many of his musicians in her recording dates with Teddy Wilson. By February of that year, Holiday was no longer singing for Basie. The reason given for her firing varies from person to person. Jimmy Rushing, Basie's male vocalist, called her unprofessional. According to AllMusic Guide, Holiday was officially fired for being temperamental and unreliable. Holiday complained of low pay and working conditions, and may have refused to sing the tunes requested of her, or change her style. Holiday was hired by Artie Shaw a month after being fired from the Count Basie band. This association placed her among the first black women to work with a white orchestra, an unusual arrangement for the times. In situations where there was a lot of racial tension, Shaw was known to stick up for his vocalist. Holiday describes one incident in her autobiography where she could not sit on the bandstand with other vocalists because she was black. Shaw said to her, "I want you on the band, stand like Helen Forrest, Tony Pastor and everyone else." When touring the American South, Holiday would sometimes be heckled by members of the audience. In Louisville, Kentucky, a man called her a nigger wench and requested she sing another song. Holiday lost her temper and needed to be escorted off the stage. By March 1938, Shaw and Holiday had managed to be broadcast on radio WABC. Because of their success, they were given an extra time slot to broadcast in April, which increased their exposure. The New York-Amsterdam News reported an improvement in Holiday's performance ability while reviewing the broadcasts. Metronome reported that the addition of Holiday to Shaw's band put it in the top brackets. Holiday could not sing as often during Artie Shaw's shows as she could Basie's. The songs were more instrumental with fewer vocals. Shaw was also pressured to hire a white singer, Nita Bradley, with whom Holiday did not get along, but had to share a bandstand. In May 1938, Shaw won band battles against Tommy Dorsey and Red Norvo, with the audience favoring Holiday. Although Shaw admired Holiday's singing in his band, saying she had a remarkable ear and a remarkable sense of time, her time in the band was nearing an end. In November 1938, Holiday was asked to use the service elevator at the Lincoln Hotel, instead of the passage elevator, because white patrons of the hotels complained. This may have been the last straw for her. She left the band shortly after. Holiday spoke about the incident weeks later, saying, "I was never allowed to visit the bar or the dining room as did other members of the band. I was made to leave and enter through the kitchen." There are no surviving live recordings of Holiday with Artie Shaw's band. Because she was under a separate recording label, and possibly because of her race, Holiday was only able to record one record with Shaw, Any Old Time. By the late 1930s, Billie Holiday had toured with Count Basie and Artie Shaw, scored a string of radio and retail hits with Teddy Wilson, and became an established artist in the recording industry.